could feel my life draining down from my head to my feet. I thought I was screaming, but I was just whispering, I'm dying, I'm dying. There was no sound. I had no idea if I was sitting or standing. It was just dark. Reddish glow started to happen. I smelled something really terrible, and I started hearing these moans and shrieking coming out of the fog. All of a sudden, out of the fog, this horrible demonic voice said, do you know where you are? All I could come up with was, hell? And I don't know where to go or what to do, and I don't know what happened. And there would be a scene of a completely bombed out city, but then I started hearing this horrible metallic scraping like a tank coming or something, and a big shadow went by, and I fell backwards, and I thought, oh, rats, this is gonna hurt. But the lights went out. Then this lady demon came up and said, you're one of us now. My dad was in the military, so we all moved around the United States quite often from the East Coast and finally ended up on the West Coast. The thing that was always the same in our family is my dad had become a Catholic after being shot down in World War II on the beaches in the Philippines, upside down. His plane was on fire and he couldn't get out. He was an atheist. And he said to God, if you're up there and get me out of here, I'll have my whole family convert to Catholicism. Well, a couple seconds later, a bunch of guys ran out from the jungle and cut him out of the plane and saved him. So needless to say, when he got home, he told my mother the story, and we were all baptized Catholic. No matter where we lived, all us kids went to Catholic school. We always went to church on Sunday. My dad would read the gospel and stuff at church, and my mom was always helping at the hospitals, giving communion. I mean, we were very, very devoted people. I remember about that when I was a child, I remember from first grade when we were learning things, and there was a religion class, and it says, what is God? And the answer was, God is love. And it said, where is God? And it said, God is everywhere. So I grew up with this loving feeling for God, and I believed in Jesus. And when I was a child, I just imagined talking to him all the time. I had my guardian angels, and I was a very happy Catholic. When I got into school later on and the religious teachings came about, and the nuns and the priest would start scaring us actually with their talks of hell and purgatory. And if you did this sin, it was a venial sin, and you could just go to purgatory for a little while and get your sins burned off when you died. And then you'd go to heaven, and nobody went straight to heaven except maybe Mother Teresa, St. Francis. But you will go to purgatory when you die. So they had this thing where if you said a rosary, say you got 200 days off your time in purgatory, or you went to an extra mass, or you did something good, there was always this math game going on. You could build up extra points so that when you died and went to purgatory, you could shave some of your time off. I bought that hook, line, and sinker. I totally believed that. So when I had the opportunity to help a friend, my very dearest friend, who came down with leukemia, he needed 2 caregivers. We were going to Seattle, Washington. I lived in California, and it was supposed to be 2 or 3 months, and then he'd be fixed. He'd be cured. He was only 53, same year older than me. And so I went, and I went 2 months, 3 months, 5 months, 7 months, 9 months, and he died. And by the end of that time, me and the other caregiver were just exhausted. It was day and night, 24 hours a day, running to the hospital and back. So I was a physical wreck, an emotional wreck, and a spiritual wreck, to throw that on top. I was invited down to a concert in Southern California. I went with a young man that I had met in Seattle. We were dating, and there was a terrible flu going around, very much like COVID. It attacked the lungs, and I caught it. By the time we got back to Washington, I was really sick. Didn't know quite what to do with it. One evening, I was coughing so badly there was blood everywhere. And I called up my friend and I says, I need help getting to the hospital. I can't even get down this 3 flights of stairs to get in my car. So he, thank God, he got up in the middle of the night and came driving half an hour away. He was working on a job, took me down to an emergency room in one of those, we call them doc in a box here. But by the time we got there, I could feel my life just kind of draining down from my head to my feet. And I thought I was screaming, but I was just whispering, I'm dying, I'm dying. So by the time he opened the door, I passed out in the street. He picked me up and carried me in, no pulse. They called an ambulance, got me to the hospital, and I woke up a couple days later. And there's my family, all from California and Colorado. And I thought, what's going on? I was in an oxygen tent, and I thought, I couldn't remember what happened. And they told me and said, boy, you're really sick, and you've got double pneumonia. It's turning into something called ARDS, which is acute respiratory distress syndrome. And that's very much like COVID. It's called lung failure. And they really didn't know how to treat it. This was in 1999. So that's been 24 years ago. So they said, well, all we can think to do is to trach you, which I got my scar still, put a tube in you, put you in a coma, and then we're just going to throw the book at you and try all kinds of things. And we don't want you awake when this is going on, pulling out tubes and stuff. And the doctor, the last thing he said to me was, we're going to give you this white amnesia to put you out, and you're going to be out like in a really deep sleep, and you won't be able to remember anything that happens. Okay. Brain's offline. Don't worry about it. Bye. So they gave me that. It went black, and I became conscious later on. I don't know how long. I was in the coma almost 3 weeks. But I was conscious of being in total darkness. There was no sound. I had no idea if I was sitting or standing. It was just dark. So I thought, well, I'm not hurting or anything. It doesn't look scary. I'll just hang out. And eventually this reddish glow started to happen. And I thought maybe the sun was coming up. That looked like a sunrise. So I hung out and I'm watching. And there was this fog that starts swirling all around. And I thought, fog? Oh, okay. That's weird. And then it started getting really uncomfortably warm. I smelled something really terrible, and I started hearing these moans and shrieking coming out of the fog. And I thought, this can't be good. And all of a sudden, out of the fog, this horrible demonic voice said, do you know where you are? And my mind's going 100 miles an hour, and all I could come up with was, hell? And this thing went, whoa, horrible, scared me. I turned and I ran into the darkness to get away. I didn't care if I fell in a hole or hit a wall. I had to get away from that thing. The next thing that happened, the lights would come up and I would be stunned. And there would be a scene. The first one was of a completely bombed out city that it was like a New York or something. Big buildings had fallen over and the glass was broken out of windows. There were fires and people running and screaming. And, all of a sudden I'm in the middle of this and I'm just shocked. And I don't know where to go or what to do. And I don't know what happened. I thought, well, maybe there's been an atomic bomb. But then I tucked back in between some concrete, big ones. And I thought, well, I'm just going to catch my breath here and see what's going on. Maybe I can find somebody and we can find someplace to go that's safer. But then I started hearing this horrible metallic scraping like a tank coming or something, and a big shadow went by. But it was like something I'd never seen before. It looked like an alien ship. And I thought, oh my God, maybe it's aliens. But anyway, I finally decided I'm not going to do myself any good in this spot. I'm going to run for it, see if I can get in one of these buildings. So as I was running, I tried to climb up over this fence thing and I lost my grip and I fell backwards. And I thought, oh, rats, this is going to hurt. But the lights went out and then the lights came up. And this happened time and time again. I would get in a situation that was very discombobulating, is a word we use. I didn't know where I was or what to do or what if it was going to be good. It was never good. The first time I saw a demon was the lights came up and this big thing. I kept looking up and up and up to see how big it was. And it was huge and it was like hairy and weird raggy clothes. There's no other word for it. It was a demon and he had a big stick. And I thought, oops, and I froze. And he said, do you want to get out of here? And I thought, gosh, that was perfect English. I said, yes, I do. I thought, well, maybe he's got some intelligence and he knows a way out. He says, well, I got a job for you. And I said, job? And he says, yeah. And he waved his arm. And as far as I could see was these blackberry vines. They were all intertangling with these big thorns on them. And I'm from Washington. We have a lot of those up here, and they're very difficult to get rid of. You've got to have heavy gloves and big snippers. So he says, yeah, you cut down all those for me, and I'll see that you get out of here. And I thought, there's a catch here somewhere. I don't trust this guy. So he hands me a little pair of children's scissors and starts to laugh. And I thought, well, he's just toying with me. But I thought, it made me mad. And I thought, well, I want to get out of here. If this is the only way, I'm just going to have to do it. So I scritched down in here. I was getting all cut up. And I started gnawing on this cane and gnawing and gnawing. And finally it broke free. And I went to put it behind me. And I turned back around and it grew all the way back. And I looked up at this demon and he's laughing so hard. He thought this was so funny. But I thought it made me mad. And I thought, I'm getting out of here. And if this is what I've got to do, I've got nothing else to do. I don't know where else to go. I started cutting. Lights go down. I wait a couple seconds. The lights come back up. So this kept happening. Usually the situations got more serious in that they were more dangerous. I don't really have time to do it, the whole thing here. It was quite extensive. But there was a terrible incident with another demon in an abortion clinic. They wanted me to work there, and I was a pro-lifer, and that was just like the worst thing I could do. And I said no after trying to do this job, thinking I could escape somehow. And I said, no, I'm not going to do it. Every time I said no, they'd say, it's just going to get worse. You might as well despair because you're not getting out of here. And I thought, no, there's something in me that knows that I can't despair. That's the number one thing that the Catholics tell you, don't. That's the unforgivable sin. And I thought, no, I've got to keep going, no matter what. So in between these segments, there was like this long road, just dirt and rocks. And of course, there's no sun or no stars. You can't tell what time it is. It's just always now. It's eternity. But I didn't know that.
So no idea if it's day or night or how many days or hours you've been.
It's always the same. It's always this like desert with, my experience was anyway. Mm-hmm. And then at the edge of it was kind of a reddish glow. And it's funny when I was looking at the Iceland pictures, and they have the lava coming up, just that's what it looked like. I was on this road and I thought, well, at least I can see all around me. Nothing's going to sneak up on me. And maybe this is the road out, So I walked and walked and walked and walked and walked. At one point I was trying to find some sense of humor because nobody down there has a sense of humor. I thought, this is just a treadmill. It's just a huge treadmill. And I'm just walking and I'm not getting anywhere. But things would happen on the road. And toward the end, I didn't know it was the end. I never thought I was dead. You don't feel dead. Your body is like a car. And you get in the car and you drive around Earth and you use your body to experience this reality, which isn't really reality, but this play that we're in. And then when you die, you just get out of the car and it's still you, So I was still me walking along, and I saw ahead of me what appeared to be, I don't know, people walking back and forth across my road because there's no way other road. And I thought, oh no, now what? I'd already gone through a lot of stuff. And now these people, I slowed down. As I was getting closer, it's really like twilight. They were all dressed in black rags and they were muttering, and some of them were stumbling. And I thought, this can't be good. This is not your run-of-the-mill folks. And as I thought I've got to go through them because I have to get to the other side of the road. Otherwise, I don't know where I'm going to end up. And so I thought, well, I'll just look down and I'll just kind of mutter and stumble and see if they don't, maybe they won't recognize that I'm there. Well, I got about halfway through and they all froze. And I thought, uh-oh. So I stopped, tried to look like them. And then they started getting in a circle kind of around me, a rough circle. The women, the ones with the long dress rags, went to the outside, and the men started coming toward me. One of them hit me in the chest and knocked me down. Another one kicked me. And then they attacked me. It was terrible. And finally, when they were finished or tired or whatever, one of them leaned down in my face, and I noticed his skin was falling off. And I thought, oh, they looked like zombies or something. And he had terrible breath. And he said, now we've got AIDS. And now you've got AIDS and you can't die. You're just going to get sicker and sicker and end up like us. I thought, this can't get any worse. Then this lady demon came up and said, you're with us. You're one of us now. Get up. And I grabbed what I could of my clothes, and I walked over to a group of other women that looked like they'd been through what I had. And she says, okay, follow me. So we were kind of in the darkness, some trees, but as we started walking out, she said, single file, as far as I could see was tundra. It was snow, just ice and snow. Everything was white, but in a bad way. And it was starting to come down harder and harder, the snow. We just had our rags. And I know I kind of, at one point, seemed to float above I could see us all in this line. And, the snow was up to our chests. We had been walking so long that it was that, and we were just freezing. We got to this shack in the middle of nowhere, had no insulation. The windows were busted out, but at least it was out of the wind. So she says, all right, everybody inside. And so we went in and sat down on the floor and tried to huddle up against one another. Again, we all thought we were alive. And she came in and said, okay, now we wait for customers. And we thought, oh, you're kidding me. And I said to her, I've been here a really long time, and this seems like a particularly lousy day, time. Is there something I don't know? She says, it's Christmas on Earth. That's always the worst day in hell. I thought, you mean this is real? I thought, oh my gosh. And then I got mad again. I thought, I shouldn't be here. This is crazy. This is nuts. I thought, okay, I know what'll bug her. So I started singing a Christmas carol, Away in a Manger. She turned around. She was furious. She said, shut up. And some of the other ladies started singing, Away in a Manger, no crib for his bed. And she said, I mean it. And I said, the little Lord. And she screamed and jumped at me. And I just closed my eyes. It got dark. And then the lights came. But this time, the lights were warm and embracing. And this joy was just filling me up like a balloon with helium. I was just ecstatic and blissful and happy, and like I'd never been before in my life, just floating and rolling in this love. And it was awesome. And I thought, oh, I don't ever want to leave this. This is wonderful. And as I floated around, it started to kind of solidify, and I could kind of feel like I was standing, and I could see kind of walls, and then over to one side, I kind of saw a table with a great big book open about halfway. And I thought, they were showing me something in that book. But all I could remember was saying, no, that's going to be too hard. And then I looked up, and there's my friend that had died the month before. He was standing there. And the last time I had seen him, with dying of leukemia, he had been, just awful looking and no hair. And now he looked great. Instead of 53, he looked about 35, and he was wearing a sweater I gave him for his Christmas. And he was happy, and he was so glad to see me. And I thought, he doesn't know he's dead. I'm not going to be the one to tell him. And he started laughing. And I thought, well, now I didn't say that out loud. Oh my gosh, if he's dead, then I'm dead. And I'm in heaven. And this is like the best news ever. I was so excited. He was standing kind of in front of this archway door. And I says, why are we just standing here, man? Come on, show me stuff. I want to go see it all. This is going to be so much fun. And he got a little closer, not so close as I could touch him. And he said, now, Mary Kay, you've got too much left to do. I said, what? You mean they're throwing me out? And I said, no. I stamped my foot. I crossed my arms and I said, no. Boom, the lights went out. The lights come up. I'm thinking, oh no, there's people milling around. The lights are too bright. I can't move. What is happening? And my daughter turns around and says, Mom is back. And I thought, back? I couldn't talk. I had that thing in my throat and I couldn't move. I had shrunk down to 86 pounds. I had no muscle mass left and I literally couldn't move. The next day when the doctor came in, I could blink and move this finger. That was it. So they're all talking at once, you know, about how I've been in this coma and they thought they'd lost me. Doctors had told them to come in and say goodbye. And you know, it was a miracle. And I was just completely overwhelmed. And I was mad. My mom said, Kathy, we had a prayer circle going around the world, which they did, and we brought you back. And I thought, oh, if I could get my you, I don't want to be back. But I couldn't talk. And that was probably a good thing because I would have been rather rude. So then it goes into my recovery. I mean, I was in that ICU unit for 3 weeks. I was there another week. And then because I couldn't move, you know, they had to tie me in a chair to get me to sit up so I could get my back muscles back. They put me in a physical rehab hospital for a month. And I had to work every day except weekends, learning how to crawl and button and talk and swallow. And I had, you know, I had to learn I was like a child, a baby. I had to learn everything all over again. It was very depressing. It was awful.
I can imagine. Yeah.
I didn't want to be there. I was so mad at my friend it was just, and then I was scared because I thought, well, heck, if that's happened to me once, what's going to happen to me when I die again? I'm going to have to go through that whole damn purgatory thing again before I can go to heaven. I was just afraid. I was lost. And
I can imagine.
Nobody would listen to me. You know, they say, oh, you know, what happened? And I said, well, it's kind of bad. Ooh, don't want to hear about that. You know, or my mother finally said, Kathy, what did you do to go to hell? And I said, I don't know. You know, it was just awful. So finally, it took me years and years and years, 10 years before I finally had these synchronicities. It was like a timing thing. I'd meet this person and they say, oh, you need to talk to so-and-so. They're having a medium come down. She talks to spirits. You might find that interesting. And I thought maybe she knows what's going on. So I went to her, you know, thing, and it was dumb. And I didn't want to go again. And the guy says, well, she's coming again. You know, you've got to go, give it another chance. And the thing that happens when you get back, you know, you've got this conscience that you live in with earth. And a lot of times, you know, you'll be thinking of doing something and your conscience says, it's not a good idea, you know, so you've got that. But when you get back, man, that thing is loud. I mean, we all call it the voice. And then my friend Louisa Peck is the one that explained to me about the voice. When I went to this first IANDS meeting, I had to drive an hour up to Seattle in that horrible traffic and go to this meeting where they said that there was hundreds and thousands of people who'd have these experiences. They can help you. So I was hopeful, you know, I got there and I met Louisa. I was told I had to meet somebody. I had to go and I had to meet somebody. And so I made it very difficult for anybody to sit next to me. And Louisa walked in and walked by my row and then cocked her head like she heard something and backed up and then came all the way down like 15 chairs and sat right next to me. And nobody was around me. And I thought, oh, man. So at the break, I said, I was supposed to meet you today. And she says, I know. And I says, what do you mean you know? And she says, well, didn't the voice tell you? And I said, the voice, yeah, I've got the voice. She says, oh, you'll get used to it. And I says, well, what did the voice tell you? And she says, well, I was walking by and the voice said, oh, go sit with that girl over there. She's really nice. So I did. And I thought, she makes it sound so easy. So she was a person that I clung to. She was fairly new like me. And finally I was coerced into telling my story at one of the meetings. And they were so thrilled. All we get is all the rainbows and angels and stuff. We want to hear one of the bad ones, you know. I said, what do you want? Popcorn? When I'm telling, you know, this is not funny to me. But the more I told it, the less hold it had on me. And it started making sense. That took a long time. But in talking to other people who've had the distressing ones, and it's about 12 to 15% of them do, maybe higher, because we don't like to talk about it. And I got into IANDS, and about 3 years ago, I started a sharing group that meets once a month and invite the people that have had the distressing ones. And it's been super, because I don't know how many people have shown up that have said, I've never told this story to anybody, but I feel safe with you people because you know, and maybe we can figure out what's going on. But for me, I've come to realize that I manifested that whole thing. I totally know that God is all loving, all forgiving, and would never condemn anybody. So did I end up there? Well, like the rest of the people I've talked to, I believed it. My whole life I was told I was going to go to this place. So I've got free will. I made my own, and I took all the horrible things that happened to me in my life, and there were many of them, and I made them even worse. And I stuffed them into this experience. And I also learned from the IANDS people that, we all start off in heaven. We're all spirit. We're just extensions of God, all of us. And we decide, we plan to come down to earth. And there's other places we can go. And we reincarnate innumerable times. And I'm told the toughest gig is earth. That you've got to be a really brave soul to come down here and try and learn lessons and try and improve the world's situation. You've got to be brave. So we all start off with our hundreds of soulmates, and we all decide to go. This time, I'm going to be your mom. You're going to be my best friend. You'll be my teacher. You and I will get together for about an hour while we're here. This time we'll just spend an hour together. Next time, maybe we'll do something else. We'll plan these things to learn, to experience. It's just something great to do. And so for me, I learned that I planned this whole thing. I can now go back and look at the things that were hellish for me and try and find the reason I chose those things and what happened because of them. One of the worst things that ever happened to me was I really wanted my first baby. And while I was pregnant with her, I had a really bad dream about it. I had a bad feeling about it. I thought it was just my jitters for having my first baby. I said extra rosaries. I went to extra novenas. I did all these things, prayer, everything I could to make it be okay. And when she was born, she had multiple birth defects that caused her to have this horrible surgery when she was 2 days old. And her heart was a mess. And they just sewed her up and said, let her die. So I never even got to hold her. I was 19 years old, and my world fell apart. So to be able to look back on that and say, okay, let's reframe this. She chose to come down for a very short time. She wanted to be with me. She says, okay, I know this is going to be tough, but I'll volunteer. I'll come down. I'll stay there a short time, and then I'm going back to wait for you. And I had to think, okay, so what good came of that? Well, 2 more of my best friends in the next 3 years lost babies. And I knew how they felt. I had one of them say, I'm so sick and tired of people calling up and saying all those terrible things that people say, oh, you'll have another child. I want this one, you'll get over it.
You'll get over it, I was going to say, yeah.
You never get over it. You just learn to live with it. All these things that they said, but you know how I feel. And I can't tell you, I couldn't have done it without you.
Absolutely.
So to go through all the things in your life like this, I could find good reasons for all of them and come to the understanding that, I'm a brave soul. I chose this stuff to help people. And so the same thing with the going to hell thing or the thinking I went to hell, but actually manifesting it. I did that so I could come back and tell people like your audience, skip the trip. God doesn't condemn anybody. But if you believe something like that, you've got free will to do anything you want, including make your own hell. But you don't have to. So I think it's so funny, sad, that the people that I talk to that have had these experiences, I'd say 90% of them are Catholic. We were just indoctrinated with that. So what happens is you come back, me and all these other millions of people, and we say, you know what? Religion sucks. That they taught us all these things that weren't true. And I believe, personally, it's a control thing. It's to keep the group together. It's whatever. I had to give it up. And most people do. And you become spiritual. You just love God, and your neighbor, and later, several months, I guess I'd been back quite a while. And I said to God, I know I'm not going to go back there again, but would you please just give me something a mantra or something I can stick in my head, something simple. No, thou shalt not. Give me something I can remember. And over a period of weeks, I got, Kathy, just be loving and kind, merciful and forgiving, encouraging, grateful, non-judgmental, and useful. And every morning, I try and say that little prayer. And even if you just say, today, I'm going to be loving and kind, no matter what happens. Some guy hits me in his car, or some lady makes me angry in the grocery store, whatever. Just take a breath, loving and kind. And that's all we need to know.
I love that. And I also wanted to say, to your point about religion, and you were saying at the beginning, being raised Catholic and understanding that there's a reckoning, that there's you have to pay for your sins. They're all like tallied up for you. I grew up Orthodox, so Christian as well, but Orthodox. And I think I would say that I was religious and I am religious, not very much so, but I'm also spiritual. And I think the main difference that I've always seen between Orthodox, and I always call it just Christian because I think there's a lot of similarities, but I think the biggest difference is at least in my household or in my practice, what we do is a lot of focus on being a good person and on forgiveness, on the positive things. We don't really think of, that's a sin or you shouldn't do it because there's punishment associated with it. But I've always been raised, I think, to look at, you have to be a good human being. Can you help somebody? Can you be of service? And if you can, that you should do so. And I think perhaps that's the biggest difference between Orthodox and Catholics.
Super. Yeah, you're lucky. You're very fortunate to be in that environment.
And I'll have to say, there's definitely, because I think religion it just has different definitions for everybody. And there's moments when you connect more with one religion and moments when you connect less. And for me, it's just been taking the pieces that made sense to me and that resonated with me. And I found a lot of pieces, I think, in Buddhism as well, reading about it, that I felt resonated with me. And I thought, well, I don't think there's anything wrong with, taking advice, just following certain trains of thought. And I think that's ultimately, the mantra that you have, I think that's ultimately what we should all strive to be. But what I wanted to dive a bit deeper into, so these negative, or this is actually what we make of it. Because to me, even from the very short description that you gave me of your upbringing, when you were telling me the experiences that you've had, I was thinking ooh, it sounds a bit like those experiences are maybe a bit personalized to you. Did you feel that way, that they were tailored for you to go through them?
Yeah, I made it up. So over the last, it's been 24 years, I've been able to pinpoint all of those, like the very first scene with that destruction of that city and the buildings and the fire. In 1989, when I lived in Santa Cruz, California, they had a 7.1 earthquake. And I was downtown under my desk as the city fell down. And when I was banged around underneath my desk, everything in the office was falling, and it was people screaming, horns honking. The house just a block down fell off its foundation and caught fire. The fire engines are going back and forth. You're still getting the shakes every couple of minutes. It was the end of the world, as far as I was concerned. I stood up, and I can see people running and screaming. There was one guy just sitting on his car screaming, and I could see the dust from where the town it was all brick and old, it just fell down. And I thought, how am I going to get home? I mean, it was awful. And that was part of my hell. And I had been raped, and that was part of my hell. And I could trace it all back. So that just reinforced God didn't do that. I did it. And again, I think I did that so that I could come back and tell people, don't do what I did. Don't make your own hell. Really, really, really trust in God's love and forgiveness. Don't make your whole life miserable, and you're counting up your sins, and you're trying to, that's no way to live. If you live being loving, it's going to change the world one person at a time. And the other thing that was interesting was that ringing in my ears, if you've got too much left to do, here I am 77 years old, and I wrote the book 2 years ago I was quarantining like everybody else. And I thought, how in the heck there's 10,000 books a day how am I going to do this? And all of a sudden, I don't know, just after my book went out, I got a call from Kirsty Salisbury in New Zealand. And she says, hi. And I said, hi. And she said, do you want to be on my podcast? I just heard about your book. And I said, what's a podcast? And she says, well, I put you on in my show. And I says, well, I can't afford to go to New Zealand. And she says, no, it's done on the computer. So I said, okay, so we sat down and had a great time. And then somebody saw that one, and somebody saw that one. And now I've been on, this is number 131 in the last 3 years. One program alone got over 1 million views, 1,008,000 counting. All the other ones have certainly gotten so here I am laying in the hospital, unable to breathe or move. And I've been able to tell my story to over 2 million people. I mean, God works in strange ways, that just lets me know I'm on the right track. I did this for a reason, and it's to let people out of their shackles and they're not afraid to die. I worked for hospice for a couple of years after I got back, which is very common. You want to be around people who are dying. You're so jealous. You're just so jealous, which puts you in a really good mood. And one little fellow was dying. He was so scared and all that. And I said, I told him, I'm just so jealous. And he said, what? You're going to see all your friends. You're going to be young and healthy. It's just, you're going to be ecstatic, and it's so much fun. He goes, oh, so he starts settling down. I'm getting ready. And it's just been a blessing. The whole thing, I look back on it, and what an incredible blessing.
Absolutely. And I think your message is just such a beautiful and empowering one. And, you mentioned not being sure how you will get your message out there when you are recovering. And I think, these things sort of fall into place. I truly believe in synchronicities. And I think, I don't know if it's guiding angels or things that just fall into place because they have to. But I think when the message is good enough, like everything else, you just have to take the first step, and then the path will be in front of you. Absolutely.
You just have to show up. It's all laid out. Just show up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What I wanted to ask you, Kathy, Why do you think this happened to you and not to anyone else?
Well, I know now that it's happened to millions of people. I mean, that's, I mean, I know there's millions and millions of people that have had the good ones, but there's also a high percentage that have had distressing ones. And when I listen to them tell their stories, they're always different from mine because they were their experiences that they manifested. And it's always such a relief to know that, yeah, I manifested that for a good reason. I planned it. And, you know, you can go back and look at all the things that happened in your life. And even if you don't have an experience like that, a lot of times you'll say, oh, I lost that job and it was the end of the world. But gosh, if I hadn't lost that job, I wouldn't have gotten this one. Or if I hadn't broken up with that guy that I loved with all my heart, I wouldn't have this wonderful husband I do now. So, you know, it all works out. It's all good. That's the saying we use a lot. It's all good.
Absolutely. I always believe that. And I think what I also wanted to point out earlier, you were talking about your first pregnancy. And what I wanted to say that I really admire is how you've shifted the frame from, you know, something happening to you, something awful happening to you. And I think it's very often that we see people stuck in why do I have to bear this? Why is this happening to me? And I can definitely understand having those thoughts and feelings. Like, why do the other people out there not go through that, and why is this my cross to bear?
Yes.
But your frame shift of, you know, like, this gave me this opportunity, and I'm getting a feeling that every challenge that you've encountered in your life, you've managed, perhaps after your NDE, you've managed to find a frame of what can I learn from it? Why has that been beneficial, perhaps? Or why is it good that it happened to me? Because maybe I was able to take it more than anyone else.
That's true. And I think another, to piggyback on that, another thing is knowing that heaven, whatever you want to call it, reuniting with our source, which is love, is for everybody. So you don't have to worry. Like, I have a friend whose son committed suicide and they thought, oh, you know, the church teaches he's going to go to hell. No, he did not go to hell. He's in heaven. Now, there is another thing about that I've learned from this, and that's about we all get a life review. God doesn't judge us. Nobody judges us. We get to see our entire life from start to finish. Usually they say with a couple of guides or angels or somebody just to be there with you. And you get to see every single thing your whole life and how interesting that is. And then they turn that kind of around, and then you get to see how it felt to interact with you. You get to see your spouse, your kids, your neighbor, how they felt when you said, oh, let me give you a ride to the bank. And that person says, oh, thank God, I really needed to get the bank. Kathy is so nice. I feel good. I feel protected. I feel helped by her. And then you got the people that say, you know, oh, I get to see the time where maybe I cut somebody off in traffic because, you know, I was in a bad mood and it just made me angry. And that person was on a heart medication and they got palpitations and all the fear. I would get to feel that fear and anger and all that stuff that I caused. So it's kind of a cause and effect thing, a karma thing. It's not a judgment. So when I run into people, and I always do, and this is a question I always ask, so what happened to Hitler? He doesn't get punished. He's not in hell. Well, if you just imagine Hitler getting to have the experience of feeling all the pain, all the fright, all the, you know, everything that those millions of people felt, you know, he's probably halfway through his life review by now. I mean, you couldn't do any more to the guy than give him the feeling of all that anxiety and pain and terror. So, and it's not God. It's just, you know, what you put out, you get back. It's just that simple.
I love that. So if we are to bring this back to what can we take from it, if I were to ask you, how can I or anybody listening to us just live our best lives is such a catchy TikTok slogan nowadays, but our best lives in terms of how could I, for instance, be the best human being that I could be?
I'm gonna circle back around to being conscious of being loving and kind in all situations, and knowing for sure you're going to heaven. Everybody you love that's gone before you is waiting. My dad died 3 years ago, and he was one of the only people that listened to me at first. And in my book, he writes the first chapter because he's started the whole thing in my family of becoming Catholic. But he and I have got a date when I go finally meet him up in heaven. We're going to go fly around and go down inside a black hole, see what's inside. We got plans, and he is with me all the time. And all you have to do is think of those spirits, and they're with you. I mean, they're in eternity right now, looking down at us saying, "Oh, Kathy, 100 years is a blink of an eye. You got this. You can do this. It's not that long, and then you'll be back with us. We're all together again, and we'll sit around and say, 'Boy, wasn't that a hoot?' I never thought we'd pull that off." But it lightens up everything, knowing you're going to be in heaven with all your loved ones. Period. Plus, a lot of people see their pets. They're all there too. So if you got a dog, a cat, a canary, whatever, they'll be there to greet you. There's nothing to really worry about. It's all taken care of. You have planned your life. You're experiencing what you wanted to learn. You're going to get something out of it, or you're going to help somebody else with what you're going through. When you are going through things with a child that's into drugs or whatever, that experience gives you empathy. So the next time you run into somebody with that situation, like me, they're going to say, "I can talk to you. You know how I feel. You made it. If you made it, I can make it." It's a blessing in disguise.
So true. You worded that perfectly. And I do concur. I think indeed the point of life is just doing our best, just being as kind as we can. And it's something that I have to remind myself often, but one of the things that I live by is, can I show grace and kindness? And often enough, if somebody really pisses me off, if I'm really annoyed, and I'll just think, what's the minimum amount of grace that I can honestly extend to that person? I don't have to be a martyr, but how
Yeah.
can I approach them with a little bit of love? I can be annoyed, maybe they're not my favorite person, but one of the things that helped me a lot, and I'll share because maybe it helps other people, is when I started reading Brené Brown. She has a lot of fantastic books. One of the things she said that stuck with me is, assume people are always doing their best. So maybe you're annoyed that, somebody just cuts you off in traffic, and you go into like, "Oh, you think you're better than me. You think your appointment's more important, but like I have this and I have that. And like, who do you think you are?" And if you actually knew the story and you thought like, "Oh, maybe their spouse had an accident, they were running to the hospital, they weren't in the right frame of mind," having that story would make you be a bit more compassionate, would make all of us be. So giving people, that benefit of, they're doing the best they can, they're dealing the best they can with the situation, I think that goes a long way. And ultimately, what somebody also shared with me was, you don't have to do it for the benefit of the other person, but it does benefit you as well, ultimately, because you will be less annoyed, you will be kinder, and it's a blessing for you as well. Kathy, you mentioned earlier that being on Earth is the hardest task we can choose. That is the hardest place we can be, and I'm so fascinated by this idea that we choose our experiences beforehand, that we choose the people that we will share this earthly experience with. Can you share a bit more about how do we go through that? Why do we choose the experiences we choose?
Well, I'll know when I get home. It's heaven. Because a lot of times I'll say, "What was I thinking?" What could possibly good come out of this situation? But I have to trust. I just have to trust my higher self, that I can't see everything that's going to happen because I chose to do, to be kind or loving around this situation. I don't know how that pebble I'm throwing in the pond, what the ripples are going to be. I just have to trust. I think that's a big thing, is just really believing that I chose wisely.
Another thing that I wanted to ask you is, we have a lot of people nowadays, I think, that are struggling with anxiety, with depression, with grief, really, really difficult feelings. And a lot of times people will be so depressed that they won't really know the way forward. Through your experiences, 'cause it sounds to me like you've had a few traumas in your life. And I think often when we go through trauma, we have no idea how we're ever going to surpass it. And I don't even know if surpassing it is a word. I think we just learn to live with it, and we become more and more human and better adapted day by day. But if you could say something that would help those people that are depressed or struggling with anxiety, hopeless, is there anything that you think could help?
I'm not a psychologist or anything, but just in my experience and dealing with children that have depression or friends that have depression, it helps if they get assistance from medical personnel to try and discover if maybe you do need some medication, that because our bodies are fragile little things, and things go wrong, all the time. You don't get enough hormones, or you get too much, and it's not your fault. And it's okay to get help for this little fragile body and this little fragile human mind. So sometimes medication helps. I've had at least 3 or 4, maybe 5 therapists through my life. Having somebody you can talk to about it that's not going to judge you or tell anybody, that's very helpful. I found that very helpful. Watching some of the near-death experiences that are positive, some of those people are in horrible car accidents, and then they go to heaven, and they come back with this new understanding that was something they chose, and something that brought very positive things. It took them out of a place in their life that they really needed to have a wake-up call about, and got them somewhere they needed to be. Trusting in yourself and in the process, and knowing that you are so loved and it's going to be okay.
That's beautiful. Really, really well said. Really beautiful, Kathy. And I absolutely, I could not agree with that more. I think you have to have a little bit of faith, find the way to, take the first step, and then you'll see the second. And day by day, we find a way to be better. Kathy, it's been absolutely brilliant speaking to you and hearing your story. It's just so exciting, and getting into all the parts of your experience, and there's even much more to go into in your book. So tell me a bit about why you wrote the book, and how can people get it?
The voice was responsible for me writing the book. I kept hearing that you've got to write the book, you've got to write the book. And I didn't want to write the book because, as you can see, when I relive all this stuff, it's very emotional. I went through boxes of Kleenex writing that book. But I was stuck, during COVID. And then I had been to a conference, and there was a lady that had a little cardboard table, and she was starting to be a publisher. She had worked in the industry, and she's starting her own business. And she was a medium, talks to spirits. And I was still kind of new in this whole thing. And she stepped out in front of me when I passed her booth and said, "They say you need to write a book." And I says, "Who's they?" And she says, "The spirits." And I said, "Oh, well, now there's no running away from it, right?" So I did. I sat down and wrote it. And at first I thought I just had to write just the hell experience, but then she kept telling me I needed to have more words and more words. So I went back and explained the story of my life, since it's a memoir. And then I needed more words. So I had to go back to my parents' lives, and then eventually my grandparents' lives. And it's really interesting when you sit down and look at your life from that different perspective. Why am I me the way I am? Because there's a lot that went on before that influenced the people that brought you up, that influenced you. So you were really not this individual sterile thing on the planet. You really are a product of many generations and their feelings and their beliefs and their attitudes and their practices and all that stuff. So it was very helpful for me to do that. And then I went forward to my time with IANDS and what I've learned. And so the book is got a lot of humor in it. I mean, I did not lose my sense of humor. That's my most valuable gift. I think that's God's greatest gift to humankind. So I've got a website, and it's the name of the book, which is MISFIT in Hell, because I was always bucking everything they told me to do, to have an expat. And an expat or an expatriate is someone that lives in one country. They go to another country to do their work, and then they go home. Well, we're all from heaven. That's our home. And we come down to earth and we do what we promised to do, our work, and then we get to go home. So it's MISFIT in Hell to heavenexpat.com with a www. And that'll tell you more about me in the book. And then there's this place there where you can send me an email if you've got a question or just want to say hi.
Beautiful. Well, I would definitely encourage everybody to check it out, check out the book, check out the website. And thank you so much, Kathy. I think it's just so beautiful that you're sharing your story. As you've said, not many people come forward with, the more negative near-death experiences. And if anybody watching has something to share, then I think definitely connect to Kathy, connect to IANDS. Because everything you're going through, it's always easier when you're in a group.
Thank you for having me on the show. It's delightful to meet you.